It all started with a dusty old key. Emma had always been drawn to her grandmother's attic, a cluttered treasure trove of forgotten memories. Boxes of yellowed photographs, vintage dresses, and tarnished jewelry filled the space, but it was the small, rusted key that caught her eye. It was tucked inside an envelope with her name on it, written in her grandmother's elegant handwriting. "What does this open?" Emma wondered aloud, turning the key over in her hands. Her grandmother had passed away years ago, leaving behind more questions than answers. Determined to solve the mystery, Emma began searching the house for a lock that matched the key. Hours turned into days as she combed through every room, every drawer, every corner. Just as she was about to give up, she noticed something strange in the basement. Behind a stack of old furniture, there was a door she had never seen before. It was small, barely noticeable, with a lock that matched the key perfectly. Her heart raced as she inserted the key and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. With a flashlight in hand, Emma descended the steps, her footsteps echoing in the silence. At the bottom, she found herself in a hidden room. The walls were lined with shelves, each filled with strange artifacts, ancient books, peculiar trinkets, and maps of places she didn't recognize. But what caught her attention was the large, ornate mirror in the center of the room. As she approached the mirror, her reflection began to shimmer and distort. Before she could react, the surface rippled like water, and a hand reached out, grabbing her arm. Emma screamed as she was pulled into the mirror, tumbling into a world unlike anything she had ever seen. The world on the other side was both familiar and alien. The sky was a deep shade of purple, and the trees glowed faintly in the twilight. Strange creatures roamed the landscape, and in the distance, she saw a towering castle made of crystal. Emma stumbled to her feet, her heart pounding as she took in the surreal landscape around her. The air was thick with the scent of something sweet and unfamiliar, and the ground beneath her feet shimmered faintly, as if made of crushed gemstones. She turned, her eyes widening as she saw a figure approaching her. He was tall, with piercing blue eyes and an air of quiet confidence. His presence was both calming and unnerving. "Who are you?" Emma demanded, taking a step back. Her voice trembled, but she tried to sound firm. "Where am I? What is this place?" The man held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Kale. I'm here to help you." Emma's eyes narrowed. "Help me? How do I know I can trust you? I don't even know where I am." Kale's expression softened. "I understand your fear. This place is called the Verdant Expanse. It's one of many realms connected to your world. You were brought here because you have a role to play, a role your grandmother once held." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "My grandmother? What does she have to do with this?" Kale hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "She was a guardian, tasked with protecting the balance between realms. But the corruption spread too quickly, and she couldn't stop it. Now, it's up to you." Emma shook her head, her mind racing. "This is insane. I don't even know what's happening, and you expect me to just trust you." Kale took a step closer, his gaze steady. "I know this is overwhelming. But deep down, you know I'm telling the truth. You felt it when you touched the mirror, didn't you? That pull, that sense of purpose." Emma hesitated. He was right, there was something about him that felt familiar, something that made her want to trust him despite her doubts. She thought about it for a while, then agreed to work with Kale. Kale thanked her and then gestured toward the crystal castle in the distance. "The heart of Ether lies there. It's the source of this realm's power, but it's been corrupted. You must restore it. Follow me," Kale added. As they made their way toward the castle, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The glowing trees seemed to whisper as they passed, and shadows moved just beyond the edge of her vision. Kale explained that the corruption had given rise to dark creatures, twisted versions of the realm's guardians. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the air. From the shadows emerged a massive wolf-like creature, its fur black as night and its eyes glowing red. Emma froze, but Cale stepped forward, drawing a blade that shimmered with the same light as the trees. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice steady. The creature lunged, and Cale met it head-on. The fight was a blur of motion, the clash of steel against claws ringing through the air. Emma watched in awe as Cale moved with inhuman speed and precision, finally striking the creature down. "We need to keep moving," Cale said, sheathing his blade. "There will be more." When they reached the castle, Emma was struck by its beauty. The crystal walls reflected the purple sky, creating a kaleidoscope of colors. But as they approached the entrance, a barrier of light appeared, blocking their path. A voice echoed from within the castle, deep and resonant. "Only the worthy may enter. Prove yourself, Emma." Emma's breath caught. "How does it know my name?" Cale placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is your trial. You must face it alone." The barrier parted, revealing a path into the castle. Emma stepped forward, her heart pounding. Inside, the air was cool and still, and the walls seemed to hum with energy. She found herself in a grand hall, where 3 doors stood before her. Each bore a symbol, a flame, a drop of water, and a gust of wind. The voice spoke again. "Choose wisely, for each path holds a test of your courage, wisdom, and heart." Emma hesitated, then chose the door with the flame. Beyond it, she found herself in a room filled with fire. The heat was unbearable, but she pressed on, determined to prove herself. As she reached the center of the room, the flames parted, revealing a pedestal with a glowing ember. "Take it," the voice commanded. Emma reached out, her hand trembling as she grasped the ember. Instead of burning her, it filled her with warmth and strength. The flames vanished, and she returned to the hall, where the next door awaited. After completing the trials of water and wind, Emma stood before the final door. It led to the heart of ether, a massive crystal pulsating with light. But something was wrong, the light was dim and flickering, and dark tendrils of corruption snaked through the crystal. As Emma approached, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, her face eerily familiar. "Grandmother," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. The woman smiled, but it was cold and hollow. "Not quite, my dear. I am what remains of her, her doubts, her fears, her regrets. The corruption feeds on them, and soon, it will consume everything." Emma's heart ached. "I won't let that happen." The figure laughed, a sound that sent chills down Emma's spine. "You think you can stop it? You're just a child, playing at being a hero." But Emma stood firm. "I am her granddaughter. And I will finish what she started." With that, she placed her hands on the heart of ether, pouring all her strength and determination into it. The crystal began to glow brighter, the dark tendrils retreating. The figure screamed, dissolving into shadows as the corruption was purged. When Emma opened her eyes, she was back in the hidden room beneath her grandmother's house. The mirror was still, its surface reflecting only her own face. But something had changed. She could feel the power of the heart of ether within her, a connection to the realm she had saved. Cale appeared beside her, his expression one of pride. "You did it, Emma. You restored the balance." Emma smiled, but her heart was heavy. "What happens now?" "Now," Cale said, "you take your place as the new guardian. The journey is just beginning." As Emma looked around the room, she noticed something new, a map on the wall, marked with locations she didn't recognize. It was a guide to other hidden doors, other realms in need of protection. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her new responsibility. But she also felt something else, hope. She had uncovered the truth about her family, discovered her own strength, and found a purpose greater than herself. Emma spent hours studying the map she found in the hidden room. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a tapestry of swirling lines and glowing symbols that seemed to shift and change as she looked at them. Each symbol represented a different realm, and some were marked with a faint red glow, indicating danger or imbalance. Kale explained that these realms were connected by ancient portals, much like the one in her grandmother's basement. Your grandmother was tasked with maintaining the balance between them, he said. But as the corruption spread, she could no longer keep up. Now, it's your responsibility. Emma traced a finger over one of the glowing symbols. Where do we start? Kale pointed to a realm marked with a tree symbol. The forest expanse. It's the closest to collapse. If we don't act soon, it will be lost forever. As they prepared to leave, Emma noticed something strange about the map. One of the symbols, a crescent moon, was pulsing faintly, as if calling to her. She made a mental note to investigate it later. The portal to the forest expanse was hidden in an ancient oak tree deep in the woods. As Emma and Kale stepped through, they were greeted by a lush, vibrant forest. But something was wrong. The trees were withering, their leaves turning black and falling to the ground. The air was thick with the scent of decay. A small creature, no taller than Emma's knee, emerged from the underbrush. Its skin was bark-like, and its eyes glowed with a faint green light. You've come too late, it said, its voice trembling. The corruption has taken root. Emma knelt down. We're here to help. Tell us what we need to do. The creature led them to the heart of the forest, where a massive tree stood. Its trunk was split open, oozing a dark, viscous substance. This is the life tree, the creature explained. It sustains our realm. But the corruption has poisoned it. Emma placed her hands on the tree, feeling its pain as if it were her own. She focused on the power of the heart of ether, channeling it into the tree. Slowly, the dark substance began to recede, and the tree's leaves turned green once more. But as they celebrated their victory, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It was the same figure Emma had seen in the Crystal Castle, her grandmother's corrupted self. You can't save them all, it hissed before vanishing into the shadows. Back in the hidden room, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the pulsing crescent moon symbol on the map. She asked Kale about it, but he seemed uneasy. That realm is different, he said. It's a place of dreams and nightmares, where reality bends and twists. Even your grandmother feared it. But Emma was determined. If it's in danger, we have to help. Reluctantly, Kale agreed. They activated the portal and stepped through, finding themselves in a realm of endless twilight. The sky was a deep indigo, dotted with stars that seemed to pulse like living things. The ground was covered in a fine, silver mist, and strange shapes moved in the distance. As they ventured deeper, they encountered a group of dreamlike beings. Their forms shifted constantly, from humanoid to animal to abstract shapes. They spoke in riddles, warning Emma of a shadow that devours dreams. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shake. The mist parted, revealing a massive, shadowy creature with glowing red eyes. It roared, sending a wave of fear through Emma. Run! Kale shouted, pulling her away. Emma and Kale barely escaped the shadow creature, finding refuge in a cave hidden behind a waterfall. Inside, they met an elderly woman with silver hair and eyes that glowed like the stars. She introduced herself as the Dreamweaver, the guardian of the Crescent Moon realm. The shadow is a manifestation of the corruption, she explained. It loves to feed on fear and despair, growing stronger with every dream it consumes. Emma's heart sank. How do we stop it? The Dreamweaver handed her a small, glowing crystal. This is a fragment of the Dreamstone. It can banish the shadow, but only if you face your deepest fears. Emma hesitated. She had always been afraid of failure, of not being strong enough to protect those she loved. But she knew she had no choice. As they left the cave, the shadow creature reappeared, its form even larger and more menacing than before. Emma stepped forward, clutching the Dreamstone. She closed her eyes, focusing on her fears and letting them wash over her. When she opened her eyes, the Dreamstone was glowing brightly. She threw it at the shadow creature, and with a deafening roar, it dissolved into nothingness. With the Crescent Moon realm saved, Emma and Cale returned to the hidden room. But their victory was short-lived. The map now showed several more realms glowing red, and the corruption seemed to be spreading faster than ever. Cale looked grim. The corruption is growing stronger. It's as if something, or someone, is fueling it. Emma's thoughts turned to the shadowy figure of her grandmother. Was it possible that the corruption had a will of its own? Or was there something else at play? As she pondered this, the crescent moon symbol on the map began to glow again. But this time, it wasn't pulsing, it was flashing, as if in warning. Emma's heart raced. We need to find out what's happening. Now. Cale nodded. But be prepared. Whatever we find, it won't be easy. The crescent moon symbol led Emma and Cale to a realm known as the Whispering Sands, a vast desert where the wind carried faint, eerie whispers. The air was dry and scorching, and the endless dunes seemed to shift and change as they walked. As they ventured deeper, they encountered a group of nomads riding on giant, insect-like creatures. The nomads warned them of a sandstorm that devours souls, a manifestation of the corruption that had plagued their realm for years. Emma and Cale pressed on, determined to find the source of the corruption. They eventually reached an ancient temple buried beneath the sand. Inside, they found a massive, swirling vortex of darkness, feeding on the life force of the realm. Emma used the power of the Heart of Ether to weaken the vortex, but it fought back, sending tendrils of darkness lashing out at them. Cale shielded her, taking the brunt of the attack. You can't save everyone, the vortex hissed, its voice echoing with the same cold tone as the shadowy figure of her grandmother. Emma gritted her teeth. Watch me. With a burst of energy, she destroyed the vortex, but not without cost. Cale was badly injured, and the realm was still fragile. Back in the hidden room, Emma tended to Cale's wounds. He was weak but alive, and his injuries served as a grim reminder of the dangers they faced. As she studied the map, Emma noticed something strange. The realms they had saved were no longer glowing red, but a new symbol had appeared, a broken shield. It pulsed faintly, drawing her attention. Cale recognized it immediately. That's the symbol of the fallen guardian. He was once your grandmother's greatest ally, but he succumbed to the corruption. If he's involved, this is worse than we thought. Emma's heart sank. Do you think he's behind all of this? Cale nodded. It's possible. He was powerful, more powerful than anyone I've ever known. If the corruption has taken hold of him, we're in grave danger. Emma clenched her fists. Then we'll stop him. No matter what it takes. The portal to the fallen guardian's realm was unlike any they had seen before. It was unstable, flickering in and out of existence as if struggling to hold itself together. When they stepped through, they found themselves in a realm of chaos. The sky was a patchwork of colors, shifting and swirling like a storm. The ground was cracked and broken, with rivers of molten lava cutting through the landscape. In the distance, they saw a fortress made of black stone, its spires reaching into the sky like jagged claws. As they approached the fortress, they were confronted by the fallen guardian himself. He was a towering figure, clad in dark armor that seemed to absorb the light around him. His eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, and his voice was a deep, guttural growl. You shouldn't have come here, he said, raising a massive sword. Emma stepped forward, her voice steady. We're here to stop you. To save the realms. The fallen guardian laughed, a sound that sent chills down her spine. You think you can stop me? You're just a child, playing at being a hero. The battle that followed was fierce and brutal. Emma and Cale fought with everything they had, but the fallen guardian was relentless. Just as it seemed they were about to be overwhelmed, Emma tapped into the full power of the Heart of Ether, unleashing a blinding wave of light that forced the fallen guardian to retreat. Back in the hidden room, Emma and Cale regrouped. The battle had left them both exhausted, but they knew they couldn't stop now. As they studied the map, Emma noticed something strange. The broken shield symbol was gone, replaced by a new symbol, a glowing star. It pulsed faintly, as if calling to her. Kale's eyes widened. That's the symbol of the Celestial Nexus. It's the source of all the realm's power. If the corruption reaches it, everything will be lost. Emma's heart raced. We have to get there first. But before they could leave, the shadowy figure of her grandmother appeared once more. This time, it spoke with a voice that was both familiar and alien. You're running out of time, it said. The corruption is spreading faster than you can stop it. But there's another way. Emma frowned. What do you mean? The figure smiled coldly. You could join us. Embrace the corruption, and you'll have power beyond your wildest dreams. Emma shook her head. Never. The figure laughed before vanishing into the shadows. The portal to the Celestial Nexus was unlike any they had seen before. It was a swirling vortex of light and energy, pulsing with the power of 1,000 stars. As they stepped through, they found themselves in a realm of pure light. The Celestial Nexus was a massive, glowing orb suspended in the center of the realm. It radiated power, but Emma could see dark tendrils of corruption creeping toward it. As they approached the Nexus, they were confronted by the fallen Guardian once more. This time, he was even more powerful, his armor crackling with dark energy. You're too late, he said, raising his sword. The corruption has already taken hold. Emma stepped forward, her voice steady. We'll see about that. The battle that followed was the most intense yet. Emma and Kale fought with everything they had, but the fallen Guardian was relentless. Just as it seemed they were about to be overwhelmed, Emma tapped into the full power of the Heart of Ether, unleashing a blinding wave of light that forced the fallen Guardian to retreat. With the fallen Guardian temporarily driven back, Emma and Kale approached the Celestial Nexus. The glowing orb pulsed with a faint, irregular rhythm, its light dimmed by the corruption creeping through its core. Emma could feel the Nexus's pain as if it were her own, a deep, aching sorrow that resonated with the Heart of Ether within her. We have to purify it, Emma said, her voice trembling. But how? Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. The Heart of Ether is connected to the Nexus. If you channel its power, you might be able to cleanse the corruption. Emma nodded, stepping forward. She placed her hands on the Nexus, closing her eyes and focusing on the light within her. The power of the Heart of Ether surged through her, flowing into the Nexus. The dark tendrils began to recede, but the effort was draining her quickly. Just as the Nexus began to glow brighter, the fallen Guardian reappeared, his form even more monstrous than before. You can't stop this, he roared, his voice shaking the very fabric of the realm. Kale stepped forward, drawing his blade. I'll hold him off. Finish this, Emma. Kale and the fallen Guardian clashed in a battle of light and shadow. Kale fought with everything he had, but the fallen Guardian's power was overwhelming. Just as the fallen Guardian was about to deliver a fatal blow, Kale made a desperate move. He plunged his blade into the ground, creating a barrier of light that trapped the fallen Guardian. Emma, now! He shouted. Emma poured every ounce of her strength into the Nexus. The light grew brighter and brighter, until it filled the entire realm. The corruption was purged, and the Nexus was restored to its full glory. But the effort came at a cost. Kale's barrier shattered, and the fallen Guardian struck him down. Emma screamed, rushing to his side as he collapsed. You did it, Kale said, his voice weak but filled with pride. You saved the realms. Tears streamed down Emma's face. I couldn't have done it without you. Kale smiled faintly. The journey doesn't end here. You'll be a great guardian, Emma. With those final words, Kale's body dissolved into light, merging with the Nexus. The fallen Guardian, weakened by the purification of the Nexus, turned his attention to Emma. You think this is over? He snarled. The corruption will always find a way. Emma stood, her grief hardening into resolve. Not as long as I'm here. The two clashed in a final, epic battle. Emma wielded the power of the Heart of Ether like never before, her attacks fueled by her determination to protect the realms. The fallen guardian fought with desperation, his strikes growing weaker as the Nexus's light drained his power. In the end, Emma delivered the final blow, a burst of pure light that shattered the fallen guardian's armor and sent him crumbling to the ground. "This isn't the end," he gasped before dissolving into shadow. With the fallen guardian defeated, the realms began to heal. The corruption was gone, and the balance was restored. Emma returned to the hidden room, where the map now glowed with a soft, steady light. She felt a deep sense of loss for Kael, but also a newfound strength. She had faced her fears, embraced her destiny, and saved countless lives. As she looked at the map, she noticed something new, a faint, golden glow emanating from the crescent moon symbol. She smiled, realizing that Kael's spirit was still with her, guiding her on her journey. Emma stood at the edge of the meadow near her grandmother's house, the same place where her journey had begun. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape. She held the key in her hand, now glowing faintly with the light of the Heart of Ether. She knew her work was far from over. There were still realms to protect, mysteries to uncover, and new challenges to face. But for the first time, she felt ready. As she looked out at the horizon, she felt a presence beside her. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but she knew it was Kael. "Thank you," she whispered. The wind carried her words away, and for a moment, she thought she heard his voice in reply. "You're not alone." With a deep breath, Emma turned and walked back toward the house, ready to begin the next chapter of her journey. Years later, a young girl named Lily discovered a dusty old key in her grandmother's attic. It was tucked inside an envelope with her name on it, written in elegant handwriting. As she held the key, she felt a strange warmth in her chest, as if it were calling to her. Little did she know, her journey was just beginning.